Stop fooling yourself. Inner steel, full script. The universe has never once adjusted itself to protect your feelings. Not once. It didn't soften the blow when Rome fell. It didn't pause when great men were thrown into prison cells, exiled to islands, stripped of everything they'd built. It didn't whisper comfort into the ears of men sitting in the wreckage of their own choices, wondering what went wrong. Reality moves. It doesn't wait. And it has no interest in whether you're ready. There is a war happening inside every man right now, and most of them are losing it without ever knowing they stepped onto the battlefield. It's not a war with another person. It's not a war with circumstances or bad luck, or the economy, or the people who didn't believe in you. It's a war with the most dangerous opponent you will ever face. Yourself. Specifically, the version of yourself you've been lying to. The Stoics understood something that most men spend their entire lives trying to avoid. Reality is not the enemy. Self-deception is. The moment you stop seeing things as they are and start seeing things as you wish they were, you begin to lose. Quietly. Slowly. And by the time you notice, you've handed years of your life to an illusion you built yourself. This video is not going to be comfortable. It's not designed to be. If you're watching Inner Steel, you already know that comfort is not what builds a man, truth does. And today, we're going to break down the 9 ways men lie to themselves, using the lives of those who refuse to, and what happened when they finally chose to see clearly. If this channel has ever challenged you, pushed you, or made you see something in yourself you didn't want to face, subscribe to Inner Steel. Because that's exactly what we're here to do. Let's begin. The man who cannot see himself clearly cannot build anything that lasts. That's not a motivational line. That's a law. And the Stoics didn't just believe it, they lived it, tested it, and some of them paid for it with everything they had. 1. The lie of later. In 49 BC, Julius Caesar stood at the edge of the Rubicon River with his army and faced a decision that would change the known world. Roman law was absolute on one point. No general could cross the Rubicon with an armed legion. To do so meant civil war. It meant treason. It meant the point of no return. Most men would have waited. Most men would have told themselves they needed more time, more certainty, a better moment, a sign. Most men would have stood at that river and manufactured 1,000 reasons why today was not the day. Caesar crossed. Not because he was reckless. Because he had spent years in brutal self-examination, studying every campaign, every mistake, every moment where hesitation had cost Rome its advantage. He understood something most men never do. Later is a story you tell yourself to avoid the cost of now. This is the first lie. The one that sounds the most reasonable, feels the most logical, and destroys more potential than almost any other force on earth. You tell yourself you'll start when the timing is right. When you have more money, more knowledge, more confidence. When the kids are older. When work slows down. When you feel ready? Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not indulge in dreams of what you mean to do. Get up and do it." He wrote that to himself. In a private journal he never intended anyone else to read. Which means he was fighting the same battle every man fights. The pull toward postponement, the seductive comfort of later, the lie that tomorrow holds something today does not. The Stoics called this procrastinatio, and they didn't treat it as a time management problem. They treated it as a philosophical failure. A failure to accept that this moment is the only one you are certain of. Everything else is speculation. Everything else is a story. There is no perfect moment waiting for you. There is only this one. The man who waits for the right conditions to become who he should be will die waiting. Caesar didn't wait for Rome to hand him the moment, he made it. The river is in front of you right now. What are you waiting for? 2. The lie of circumstance. In 1965, a United States Navy pilot named James Stockdale was shot down over North Vietnam. He ejected from his aircraft at 500 miles per hour, broke his back on landing, and was captured before he could reach the ground. For the next 7.5 years, he lived in a place called the Hanoi Hilton. He was tortured over 20 times. He was placed in leg irons for years at a stretch. He was kept in isolation, starved, beaten, and used as propaganda. By any objective measure, no man had less control over his circumstances. And yet, Stockdale did not break. Not his spirit. Not his identity. Not his mind. He organized the resistance from inside the prison. He created a communication system between prisoners so no man had to face it alone. He took responsibility for the men around him and paid for it with more torture, more isolation, more pain. When he was released and asked how he survived what others couldn't, he said something that stopped the room. "I never lost faith in the end of the story. I never doubted not only that I would get out, but also that I would prevail in the end and turn the experience into the defining event of my life, which, in retrospect, I would not trade." The men who didn't survive, he explained, were the optimists. The ones who said, "We'll be out by Christmas." And when Christmas came and went, "We'll be out by Easter." And when Easter passed, their hope collapsed because it was built on a lie, the lie that circumstances would change on their timeline. This is the second lie most men live inside, the belief that their life is primarily the product of what happened to them. It is not. Epictetus, a man who spent the early years of his life as a literal slave, who had his leg broken by his master, who owned nothing and had no freedom of movement, built a philosophy around a single distinction: the things in your control, the things outside it. His entire teaching can be reduced to that. Because once you are clear about what you can and cannot control, you stop wasting the one resource that matters, your will, on things that were never yours to begin with. Your circumstance is not your sentence. It is your starting material. The lie of circumstance whispers that you cannot move until conditions improve. That your past explains your present, and your present determines your future. That the hand you were dealt is the hand you play forever. Stockdale had a broken back, leg irons, and 7 years of hell. He still chose who he was inside of it. What's your excuse? 3. The lie of potential. There is a specific kind of self-deception that is almost universally celebrated. It sounds noble. It sounds like wisdom. And it quietly destroys men who could have been great. It is the belief in your own potential as a substitute for the demonstration of it. In 1888, a 25-year-old man was living in a rented room in Arles, France, largely ignored by the world, surviving on bread and coffee sent by his brother, producing paintings that no one wanted to buy. In his lifetime, Vincent van Gogh sold one painting. 1. He wrote to his brother Theo in letters filled with torment, doubt, fear, and a ferocious, relentless commitment to keep working anyway. He painted over 900 canvases in roughly 10 years. Not because the world told him he was good. Not because the critics agreed. Not because the money came. He painted because he had made a decision, not about his potential, but about his practice. About what he would do every single day regardless of recognition. He didn't sit back and believe in himself. He worked. He failed. He worked again. He wept. He worked again. The world is full of men who believe in their potential with absolute conviction. Who know, somewhere deep in their chest, that they are meant for something greater. Who feel it so clearly and so powerfully that the feeling becomes a substitute for the doing. This is the trap. The feeling of potential is not the same thing as the exercise of it. And the longer you let the feeling replace the action, the more dangerous it becomes. Because eventually, the feeling becomes your entire identity. You become the man who could have. Who should have. Who was right there on the edge of something great. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present. Not to the future version of yourself who has figured it all out. Not to the imagined success that lives in the gap between who you are and who you believe you could be. The present. This work. This effort. This attempt, imperfect and unglamorous as it is. Potential without pressure is just a comfortable story. Van Gogh never became legendary by believing he was capable of greatness. He became legendary by covering 900 canvases in paint while the world looked away. Stop admiring your potential. Start demanding proof of it. 4. The lie of busy. In the early 1940s, a young Austrian psychiatrist named Viktor Frankl was arrested by the Nazis and sent to Auschwitz. He had spent years developing a theory of human psychology, a manuscript he'd hidden in the lining of his coat when they took him. They found it. They destroyed it. He arrived in the camp with nothing. What Frankl observed inside the camps would reshape psychology forever. And one of the most striking things he noticed was this: the men who lost themselves fastest were not the ones with the hardest labor. They were the ones who lost their sense of meaning, who had nothing to move toward, who were simply enduring rather than building something inside their own minds. The men who survived longest, who maintained their humanity in conditions designed to strip it away, were the ones who had a reason, a direction, a project, even if the project only existed in their heads. Frankl rebuilt his manuscript from memory inside the camp. He gave lectures to dying men by firelight. He found ways to be useful in the darkest place on earth. Not because it changed his external situation, it didn't. But because it answered a question that most men never bother to ask themselves honestly. What am I actually doing with my time? This is the fourth lie, and it's one of the most comfortable ones available to modern men. The lie of busy. The performance of productivity as a cover for the absence of purpose. Being busy is not the same as being effective. Being occupied is not the same as building towards something. Filling your hours with motion, with scrolling, with meetings that go nowhere, with tasks that keep you feeling useful without moving you anywhere that matters, is one of the most sophisticated forms of self-deception available to a man with potential. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it." He wrote this 2,000 years ago. The specific distractions have changed. The mechanism has not. Men have always found ways to fill time with the feeling of work while avoiding the substance of it. Frankl had no distractions. No phone. No content. No noise. And in that silence, he built something that would outlive him by generations. What are you building? If you stopped being busy tomorrow, would there be anything left? 5. The lie of approval. In 399 BC, Socrates was given a choice. Recant your teachings, stop practicing philosophy, accept exile, or drink the hemlock. He chose the hemlock. Not dramatically. Not with rage. He died the way he had lived, calmly, deliberately, in complete alignment with what he believed. His friends wept. His students begged him to flee. He refused. Because to abandon his work to preserve his life would have meant that the life he preserved was not the one worth living. The Athenian court wanted his approval. They wanted him to beg, to retreat, to perform the kind of submission that would confirm their power and silence the voice that made them uncomfortable. He wouldn't give it. Not because he was indifferent to death, but because he was more afraid of becoming something false than of ceasing to exist. The fifth lie is the one most men organize their entire lives around without ever naming it: the belief that other people's approval is the measure of your worth. This lie doesn't announce itself. It operates silently, through the choices you don't make, the things you don't say, the work you water down so it doesn't make anyone uncomfortable. It shows up when you soften your position to avoid conflict. When you change who you are in different rooms. When you look at what you've built and feel the hollowness of knowing you built it for an audience instead of for a truth. Marcus Aurelius governed the most powerful empire on earth, commanded armies, held more influence than any man alive, and he wrote in his private journals, "I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others." He was talking about himself. And about every man who has ever let external validation become the currency he trades his identity for. Socrates had the opportunity to survive. He chose integrity instead. You probably won't face that choice in those terms. But you face a version of it every day, every time you let the fear of judgment determine what you do, what you say, what you become. A man who lives for approval is a man who has outsourced his soul. And no amount of validation will ever fill what that costs him. 6. The lie of the past. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in a prison cell on Robben Island. 27 years. He was 44 years old when they locked him up. He was 71 when they let him out. Most men, faced with that kind of loss, would do one of two things: collapse under the weight of what had been taken from them, or burn with a bitterness so complete it would consume every relationship, every decision, every moment of the life that remained. Mandela did either. What he did was something so difficult that most people misread it as sainthood when it was actually strategy. He refused to let the past determine the present. Not because what had been done to him wasn't monstrous, it was. Not because his anger wasn't justified, it was. But because he understood something the Stoics had known for centuries: the man who lives inside his grievances is still imprisoned by them, regardless of whether the cell door is open. When Mandela walked out of that prison in 1990, he did not emerge as a victim. He emerged as a statesman. He had used those 27 years to read, to think, to develop the political philosophy that would eventually dismantle apartheid and rebuild a nation. He had refused to let what was done to him write the final chapter of who he was. The sixth lie is the one men return to most often, because in many cases, the past was genuinely bad. The wound was real. The betrayal happened. The failure was devastating. The loss was not imagined. But truth does not require that you carry it forever. The Stoics made a hard distinction between what happened and what you do with what happened. The event is fixed. Your relationship to it is not. And the man who defines himself by what was done to him has given his past more power over his future than it ever deserved. You are not the worst thing that happened to you. You are not the sum of your failures. You are not the man others made you into. You are only the man you choose to be from this moment forward. Mandela walked out of 27 years of captivity and helped build a democracy. The past was real. He just refused to live in it. 7. The lie of comfort. Ernest Shackleton's ship, the Endurance, became trapped in Antarctic pack ice in January 1915. Then the ice crushed it. Then it sank. Shackleton and his 27 men were stranded on one of the most hostile surfaces on Earth with no communication, no rescue, and no certainty that anyone would ever find them. Their supplies were limited. The cold was murderous. The darkness lasted months. And Shackleton made a decision that would eventually save every single one of their lives. He refused to let any of them become comfortable in their despair. He organized games on the ice. He assigned tasks that kept men useful. He maintained discipline over the small things, meals, routines, the structure of each day, because he understood that comfort, in their situation, was death. The man who settled into the idea that this was simply how things were now had already begun to die. The man who stayed engaged, who had something to do, something to maintain, something to fight for, that man had a chance. They survived 800 miles of open ocean in a lifeboat. They crossed the unmapped mountains of South Georgia Island. Every single man came home alive. Here is what Shackleton understood about comfort that most men in safe, warm, predictable lives never confront: comfort is not peace. It is sedation. The seventh lie is the belief that ease is the goal. That the purpose of building, striving, and fighting is to eventually arrive somewhere soft, where nothing is demanded of you and every edge has been sanded smooth. That rest is the reward, and you should be trying to get there as fast as possible. But watch what happens to a man who reaches that place. Watch what happens to his posture, his focus, the look behind his eyes. Something goes out. Something that was alive becomes managed. The man who has nothing to fight for has, in a very real sense, nothing to live for. Epictetus wrote, "Seek not the good in external things, seek it in yourself." The search is the point. The requirement is the point. The difficulty is not the obstacle to the life, it is the life. Shackleton kept his men alive by keeping them struggling. The struggle was the thing that held them together. You were not built for softness. Every time you choose the easier path because it costs less, you pay for it somewhere else, in the slow erosion of your ability to handle anything that doesn't accommodate you. Stop chasing comfort. Start seeking what's worth the difficulty. 8. The lie of knowledge without action. In 1879, a young man sat in the patent office in Bern, Switzerland, reviewing other people's inventions 8 hours a day. He was 23 years old, unknown, professionally unremarkable, and possessed of a mind that had already begun to see the universe differently than anyone alive. Albert Einstein could have spent those years reading about physics. He could have consumed every text, attended every lecture, built an impressive library of understanding that he never tested, never committed to paper, never pushed out into the world where it could be challenged, refined, and destroyed. Instead, he worked. He used the hours the patent office didn't consume to develop what would become the special theory of relativity. He published it in 1905, when he was 26, in a journal called Annalen der Physik, in a paper that appended 2 centuries of physics. He didn't wait until he was certain. He didn't wait until someone gave him a laboratory, a title, a credential that confirmed he was the right person to rewrite the laws of the universe. He used what he had, where he was, with the time available. The eighth lie is perhaps the most intellectually sophisticated form of self-deception available to a capable man, the belief that acquiring more knowledge is a prerequisite to taking more action. It sounds like discipline. It sounds like diligence. It looks, from the outside, like a man preparing himself carefully before he acts. But in most cases, it is something else entirely. It is the armor of information used to protect a man from the vulnerability of being seen trying and failing. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not waste the remainder of your life in thoughts about other people. Look within." He meant, stop studying the map as a substitute for walking the territory. Stop reading about the thing as a substitute for doing it. Understanding is not the same as executing. Knowing is not the same as doing. And the man who becomes a scholar of the life he wishes he were living has confused the study of motion for movement. Einstein didn't study physics until he was ready. He worked until working made him ready. The knowledge you have right now is enough to begin. Begin. 9. The Lie of the Mirror. In the final hours of April 12, 1945, a man who had spent 12 years holding absolute power over a nation sat in an underground bunker beneath Berlin as the Soviet army closed in. Adolf Hitler had constructed, over the course of 2 decades, an almost perfectly sealed reality, one in which his generals agreed with him because disagreement meant death, one in which the intelligence he received was filtered by men too afraid to tell him the truth, one in which the gap between what he believed and what was actually happening grew wider every year until it collapsed in catastrophic, world historical ruin. We use this example not to dignify him, but because it represents the most extreme and visible case of a failure that operates at every scale of human life, the failure to allow reality to correct you. This is the 9th and final lie, and it is the one that, if left uncorrected, makes all the others permanent. The lie of the mirror is the belief that you already see yourself clearly. That the image you have of who you are, what you're capable of, what you deserve, and why things have gone the way they have, is accurate, complete, unbiased, correct. It is not. Every man carries a distortion. A curated self-image assembled from the stories he's told himself, the praise he's accepted too easily, the criticism he's rejected too quickly, the feedback he's filtered through the question of whether it confirmed what he already believed. The Stoics built their entire practice around piercing this distortion. Marcus Aurelius spent years writing private correspondence with himself designed to strip away every flattering interpretation of his own behavior. Epictetus demanded that his students examine not just their actions, but the desires and judgments that produced them. Seneca wrote letters to himself confessing his own failures of character not to punish himself, but to see himself. The practice they were describing has a name that psychologists now recognize as one of the most significant predictors of a man's capacity to grow and change: accurate self-perception. Not brutal self-criticism. Not inflated self-regard. Accurate. Clear. Honest to the point of discomfort. This requires something that almost no one teaches and almost no one practices: the ability to receive information about yourself without immediately defending against it. To let the criticism land before you decide whether it's true. To sit with the uncomfortable possibility that the story you've been telling yourself about why things are the way they are might be wrong. The man in the bunker could not do that. He had surrounded himself with mirrors that only showed him what he wanted to see, and when reality finally arrived in the form of Soviet artillery, there was nowhere left to hide. You do not have to be him. But you have to be honest about the ways in which you are. The real work of a man's life is not the accumulation of success, status, or comfort. It is the ongoing, disciplined, courageous practice of seeing himself clearly, and then building from that truth, not from the illusion. The Stoics did not promise that truth would be comfortable. They promised it would be the only thing that worked. Every man examined in this video faced a moment where they could have chosen the easier story. Caesar could have waited. Stockdale could have broken. Van Gogh could have stopped painting. Franco could have surrendered to despair. Socrates could have recanted. Mandela could have become his bitterness. Shackleton could have allowed his men to accept the ice. Einstein could have kept studying. And we could have looked away from what the bunkers showed us about the cost of a sealed mind. They didn't. Because the alternative, a life built on comfortable lies, is not a life. It is a prolonged, well-decorated performance of one. You are watching Inner Steel because some part of you already knows this. Some part of you is tired of the distance between who you are and who you are capable of being. Some part of you is done waiting for the perfect moment, the right circumstances, the approval that never quite feels like enough. That part of you is correct. Reality does not care about your feelings. But it will absolutely respond to your actions, to your clarity, to the discipline of seeing yourself without the flattering edits and deciding, from that honest ground, what you're going to build. Stop fooling yourself. The work is here. The moment is now. The man you're capable of being is not waiting in some future version of your life. He is assembled, one honest choice at a time, starting with this one. Subscribe to Inner Steel. Because the truth, spoken plainly and lived completely, is what changes a man. And that's what we're here for. Inner Steel, stop fooling yourself. 500 words.